This is Conversation Balloons, a podcast of interviews with experts and friends about all things generational. I'm your host, Leah Farish. Coming to you in this episode, sponsored by the Herzog Foundation, we're bringing you Laura McCall. She is an interior designer and a mom, and the intersection of those two callings makes a fascinating conversation. I've really enjoyed getting to know her. I found her on Instagram and was impressed with her work at Collected Interiors, and she agreed to come on and tell two stories. Today she's going to be talking about her journey to finding health for her daughter, and then the next time that she comes on, we're going to be talking about her design work and what she calls trauma-informed design. We're so happy you could come on, Laura.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel very honored and very humbled to be here.
Well, we want you to be able to tell our listeners first about what happened to start you on your journey with your daughter. What was the first sign that something was wrong?
Yeah. So it's hard to know when it started exactly. We think, kind of looking back, that potentially around 3 is when we started having symptoms, although we didn't know what we were dealing with, nor did we get diagnosed until she was 8. So, 3-year-olds are hard. Whoever said terrible twos had never had a 3-year-old, right? The three-nager thing is very real. So we had ourselves a three-nager, a little girl, very bold and wild and opinionated. And so much of what we were seeing just kind of still fit into what you would call typical or normal behavior. But it started escalating, it being behavioral issues, rage, OCD. We thought they were just kind of quirks, kind of funny things at the time that she would do. For example, it's really not funny, but I will share. She had this coping skill when she was like 3.5 that she would do the Macarena, like the dance move, when she would get nervous. And it was kind of a funny thing, but like in hindsight, it's like, oh man, that was a tick she had developed. So there was just these things, that at the time we just thought were funny little Addie things. And like I said, the rage and aggression and separation anxiety got to be really intense. Additionally, we were really dealing with a lot of strep throat with her. She had it pretty regularly. I had no clue that they were connected, none whatsoever. So at the time, I thought we just had a very, strong-willed child, coupled with this illness that we just kind of kept, at the time didn't know she wasn't recovering from. We just knew she would constantly get strep throat infections, that we would be on antibiotics on a regular basis. Fast forward several years and everything continued to escalate. We grew out of the three-nager season. So then we're like, okay, we've got another issue. This is not typical behavior anymore for this age. And had a doctor that was just continually treating strep throat. That doctor was like, you know what, I want to put her on antibiotics. And then once the antibiotics are done this round, I want to test her again when there's no symptoms. And at that time, when we tested that second time, she still tested positive, even though she had no symptoms. I was mentioning this to a friend of mine who also knew just kind of some of the behavioral stuff we were dealing with. And she's the one who said, have you ever heard of PANDAS? And at the time, I had no idea what she's talking about. Did a quick Google search. And from what I read online, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is my kid. Went to our pediatrician.
Tell us the acronym.
Yeah.
PANDAS, Pediatric, Autoimmune, Neuropsychiatric disorders associated with Streptococcus. And
you got it.
Said she was dealing with a lot of strep infections.
That's right. So there's PANS and PANDAS. You'll see them a lot together. PANS is basically Same thing, but with any infection, where PANDAS is specific to strep throat. So a lot of these kids, these PANS kids, have had the flu or some other kind of virus, and then they end up with the same issues. But we were dealing with chronic strep throat. So I brought this to our pediatrician. Hey, I'm curious about PANDAS. And she said, yep, PANDAS is hard. And that was it.
Mm.
To her credit, and I have developed a lot more compassion and understanding myself, but especially even just 3 years ago, this illness is vastly under-researched. So what she said was true. PANDAS is hard, and likely she had not done any research and had not incorporated any type of protocols into their practice. But what I heard as a mom is, you're on your own. Like, yeah, it could be this, and I have nothing to offer you. So I started researching, where can I find a practitioner in the Tulsa area? Quickly found that it was hard to find, got on some Facebook groups. Who are you guys seeing in Tulsa? I found a nurse practitioner who was able to see us, believed it's real, diagnosed. She's the one who actually diagnosed Addison. And yet also did not have a protocol. Kind of said, okay, mom, how do you want to do this? So I started piecing together from my research protocol that I thought would fit for our family, which I have no medical background. Like I was starting with nothing, just reading articles and reading stories of other families and really continually coming to the same conclusion of this might work. This could work. Where I'd read one article saying this worked for our family, we've seen healing, and then the same exact protocol for another family is like, we've been doing these things for months and see no improvement. So it was so scary and so lonely. We sat in that place for a year and a half, where I was just staying up all night, constantly researching. Our family tends to take kind of more functional medicine approach. So we kind of have a foot in both worlds, not anti-traditional, but do like to add supplements, diet, movement, all those things to our healing journey. So I was tending to do research in that realm. Found a doctor, Dr. Scott Antoine, out of, Illinois. And I started following him on Instagram and really liked what he was putting out there, really aligned with kind of the research and the protocols that he was putting out there. So we started seeing him traveling out of state, which unfortunately is a lot of what families end up having to do. And functional medicine is not typically covered by doctors. So I just want to say, like, the toll on families, emotionally, financially, physically, all of the things is just so, so, so great. So,
Talk about that for a minute.
yeah,
What the toll might be, just the isolation, the uncertainty, I would imagine sometimes moms and dads aren't aligned with each other on
oh,
what is it time to do? How much money
absolutely.
do we spend? Is this
That's,
something that
that's
will
right.
just pass?
That's right. And I think that I will speak for our family, and then I've seen this kind of as a common thread in this realm with other families who've dealt with this. But it starts that way, especially with husbands and wives not being aligned. It tends to be. My husband is the best man on the planet, best father ever. So I'll just fight anyone who says otherwise. And we were not aligned. He kind of took the stance of, she's just struggling and we'll get through this. And my mom gut just said something else is going on here. But PANDAS is such a family illness. It affects everyone. And these kids, I saw a quote one time that stuck with me, and it said, "My child is not a monster. She has been taken over by one." And that is so real. I will spare. I really want to hold my daughter's story as sacred as possible
Mhm.
through this, but I will tell you, it is the unimaginable, the rage, what we call flares. And so it gets to a point pretty quickly where moms and dads are like, we'll do anything it takes. We want our child back.
Mm.
And so we were at that point. We started seeing Dr. Antoine, and he put us on. He did what I love about the work he does, and I'm giving you access to like his information. And he wrote a book, which is phenomenal. But he does testing specific to the child, which I love. That's really what was important to me. Is like, I don't think that these kids just fall under this blanket protocol. There's so much going on with their immune systems. And that's the thing about PANS and PANDAS. It's an immune issue. So it presents as psychological. So these kids look like they need to be on psychiatric medications, but it is an immune system issue. Essentially, the antibodies are not fighting strep. They start fighting the brain. And so we have to figure out how to reset the immune system so that it does what it's supposed to do when they have exposures to illness, any illness whatsoever, different toxins, mold, which we'll talk more about that. Their bodies do not know what to do with it. And so their immune system goes wacky and it attacks the brain. So he did the blood work, kind of figured out what she was dealing with specifically, came up with a protocol very specific to her, and said, okay, we're going to kind of phase this in. We're going to start these things. We're going to add these things. I mean, it was everything from certain medications, some supplements, magnesium baths. I mean, it really kind of covered the gamut of both traditional medicine and functional medicine. We did see some improvement, and we would start to have hope, and then she'd get sick again. It's like we just could not get traction. Some of her numbers started looking better months later, others did not. During this entire process, one of the things I kept reading, and Dr. Antoine so gracefully, brought to our attention initially, was mold, and how it is such a hard element when you've got a kid with PANS or PANDAS, because, like I said, their systems don't know what to do with it. And it's everywhere. Like, outside of living in a bubble in the desert in Arizona, I'm like, how do we get away from this? And so, just fully, honestly, and transparently, I was not ready to really face that. I just kind of kept having to put it off because I just didn't even know what that would mean for our family with as much trauma as we'd already gone through with this. And that was his approach as well, which I appreciated, was, hey, we're going to try all of these things. At some point, that may be something we need to talk more about. We did test her mycotoxin levels, which is her levels of mold in the system, basically, and they were high. What he said was, these levels don't have a timestamp on them, right? So we don't know when there was an exposure, and we don't know where it was. All we knew was she'd had an exposure and her body was not able to detox it. So we were giving her all the things that would help her body detox, and it was not. So we finally had to come to the decision to have the conversation. What if it's in our house? No one else had symptoms. We did not have a known issue.
You have other kids?
Yeah, we have 2 other children.
Okay.
She's our sick child is our middle child. So we lived in an older home. We had renovated. Our older home had a crawl space and a basement. And kind of what we learned is all of those signs point to there's probably mold in this house. Again, we did not have visible mold, just kind of, put 2 and 2 together. And it had gotten so terrible in our house. We were about to have to pull her out of school. We just really weren't functioning. We made the decision to put our house on the market, and we ended up moving. We sold our house. It was very hard. We didn't tell our kids all the reason why. Just we didn't want it to come across like it was Addie's fault, So it was really traumatic for them. All of a sudden, we got to up and move. So we moved in with my mother, who had a large home and was planning on moving into an apartment. We moved in with her. We lived there for 2 months. Addie escalated to a point that I just didn't know how we were going to sustain. We had to call 911 multiple times. It was nightmares. It was what nightmares are made of as parents. And got my mom moved out into an apartment. We moved ourselves into an Airbnb, which at the time we thought was going to be a 3 week time span. We are going to do a renovation on my mom's house, get it ready for us, and then move in.
We want to take a moment to thank the Herzog Foundation and its growing media network, home to the Conversation Balloons podcast and other incredible faith-focused shows. The foundation is dedicated to strengthening Christian education, helping families, teachers, and entire school communities pass on faith and wisdom from one generation to the next. They do this through free training events, support for new and growing schools, and a media network. Learn more about how the Herzog Foundation is investing in the next generation at herzogfoundation.com.
We're in the Airbnb. We decide to have a mold dog come out, which is just such a cool. It's such a cool way to test a house because dogs are smarter than machines and smarter than humans. And these dogs, the training they have is just phenomenal. So we had one come out. Long story short, determined that the house we were about to move into was riddled with mold beyond what we could remediate. So when we got that information, we essentially found out we were homeless. We're living in this Airbnb. Our child is beyond imagination, sick, flaring, and we don't have a home. We kind of fell apart for a short time. I didn't have a lot of time to fall apart because we had to figure out what we were going to do. In the meantime, we found black mold in the Airbnb we were staying in. So she and I went to a hotel. Like we literally just went to a hotel, and so our family was separated just to try to give her a little bit of relief. We went to a hotel near a hospital just in case. I mean, it was really awful. We determined for our family, and I say that a lot. You're going to hear me say that a lot because what works for one does not work for all. And I am in no way advising this is what you should do. This is just what we did. Experts in this industry have a lot to say. And they can be kind of on from one end of the spectrum to the other. So I just really advise all families to pay attention to what works well for yours. But we determined that we wanted to try new construction. New construction is for sure not perfect. There can be issues behind the walls, but we just really wanted a place that hadn't had prior water intrusions, that had just been improperly remediated or painted over. And so we found one online. We called. The guy said, I just happened to be sitting down. So that bumps you to the top of the list. We've had other calls, but I took your call. So we went and saw it. It was a great price, great location, great size. So we got this house. And within a few days, we actually ended up finding out that the tenants that had been there before us, this house was a 2 or 3 year old house. The tenants that had been there before us, their daughter has PANDAS. Yeah. And which was just, when I say that God paved the way for this house to be ours, I mean, it just was so, I actually looked back the other day when I was preparing for this and looked back at the text message when my husband sent it to me. And we just were like, God, what are you doing? So I reached out to the woman and said, at the risk of being very creepy, we know that you've been renting this house and we're about to rent it, but our daughter also has PANDAS. And she was so sweet and was able to tell me, what cleaning products they'd been using and how they had the air ducts cleaned and every little water intrusion that they'd been watching and how they had remediated. And it was incredible. We moved in. Within 2 days, we started seeing a difference. And within 2 weeks, our daughter was back. It's just amazing. And so that's been a year ago. We're still here. We're kind of just breathing right now. Our goal is to eventually build our own house. We're doing kind of a deep dive on healthy home building, but for right now, this is a great place for us. And she is thriving. And so essentially what happened was I kind of explain it like it was like a reset button that we were trying to push with the protocol from our doctor, but it was like gunked up with mold. And so once we were able to clear that out from her living space, it's like the reset button worked.
Mm.
So now when she's exposed to someone who's sick, when she's exposed to mold, she goes to an old school. There's no way there's not mold there. But now it's like, because we were able to clear it out around her main living area and give her as clean of a space as possible, that reset button has been pushed. So her immune system is starting to do what it's supposed to do. Praise God. So that's kind of
wonderful.
our story in short.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I know that it might seem that it's a very individual story, but what did you learn that you share with other moms and dads who have children with undiagnosed issues, or who sense that there's something wrong that the teachers and the doctors aren't
Yeah.
finding?
Oh man, that's such a loaded question. But what I would say first and foremost is trust your gut. Like, you know your kid. It was, I might cry talking about this, so just bear with me. But it was so hard being in hospital rooms and triage rooms and doctors' offices and being the smartest one in the room. We went, one of the times we had to go to the emergency room, just bluntly and honestly, because we were needing to restrain our daughter and we could not do that safely. And so we had to go via ambulance to the emergency room. They got us back to a room and the nurse literally walked in and said, "So what's PANDAS?" And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's the thing tearing my family apart. Maybe do a Google research before you walk into the room. But, it was so, number one, trust your gut that something is wrong, even when the professionals that are supposed to know don't. It can be maddening, but like I kind of said at the beginning, just an understanding that this is so under researched. Even in the last 3 years since we've been battling it, there's so much more awareness. So in another 2 and 3 years, there's going to be more. I will say more now when I encounter doctors, medical professionals that haven't researched it, they at least know about it. The whole idea that PANDAS isn't real, I feel like that's gone away. And so now you've got practitioners who are deciding that they want to research, they want to take on, understanding of how to treat these kiddos. So back to your question, I would just say, just keep at it. There are so many groups like on social media, on Facebook, that can be helpful. I say this with a huge word of caution, that they can also be kind of a misery loves company type of group. I had to remind myself, the families that have had healing, they're not coming back and posting here. So I had to remind myself, everyone here is in SOS mode like I am. So they can be helpful from a sense of like to go on and maybe do a quick search of, what you're needing information, like a medication or a supplement or a doctor, kind of read the post about that and then get out. Like, I would sometimes just doom scroll and I'd be like, we're never going to get better, So I would really, really advise just use that as a tool, and be really cognizant of your own nervous system. Is this helpful? Is this helping
Yeah.
me or is this hurting me right now?
Yeah.
I did both for sure.
Well, you specialize as a designer in addressing environmental issues in the home that you're helping design, and helping people understand how light and sound and air and emotional safety can interfere with a child's life and healing. What are some things that parents need to recognize about the environment that might be interfering with their child's health?
Yeah, that's really good. So our surroundings are so often a mirror of what's going on inside of us. And I will say, like for my child, rage was a big problem. And so her room, like keeping her room clean, which is kind of one of those like blanket parent rules, like you need to clean your room. That went out the window. because it was like I had to remember my child is sick. This is not a behavior issue. This is she's ill. But what we did do is we created boxes, like tubs under her bed where she could be as messy as she wanted. We called them her anger boxes. And so that was one thing we did to kind of help give her a controlled, contained space that she could be as messy and tear things. And we went to Dollar Tree and we bought stuff that she could just shred and didn't matter and that could go in a box under her bed. So just like trying to find some creative ways to give them the space to get this energy out of their bodies. But if their rooms are in constant disorder, it's going to kind of mirror back to them this disorder that they're battling, which I want to say what I'm saying right now is really complicated. And there are days where we don't have the energy. It's just kind of a reminder to maybe get curious about it. You know, there's not like a should here. I always say don't should on yourself. But it's a reminder here that this is something to kind of keep coming back to. Get curious what works for your child. Is there a space in their room or a closet that they can destroy? Truly. And then we can have other
Pick your
corners.
battles, right?
Yeah, exactly. But to have spaces that are going to be centering to them that they will actually love. And I think my daughter at least found that she had this one space she could trash. Then she had this other space she could come back to and it would help ground her. And so she really honored that. And it wasn't even about clean as much as it was her space. It was where she put her artwork. So, it kind of just reflected back to her anchoring truths about who she is too.
Yeah, we think of our homes as like this is my home and my husband's home, but sometimes I don't realize this is my child's home.
That's right.
Someone told me the other day, do you realize how much of the day a child is in an environment that they can't get away from?
Yeah.
They are
Yeah.
not in charge of where they are.
That's right.
And to be kind about that, I think that's important.
Yes, for sure.
Do you recommend, in terms of addressing mold, years ago in another place had a really scary situation, and the way we knew we had some mold. We didn't know how bad it was. Would you recommend, what we did was contact the local university and find out who their mold expert was, because we were afraid that a mold or a remediation company would just find mold
Of course.
and find a $58,000 job to do on our house.
Yes.
So we tried to get a neutral expert. What would be your recommendations if you suspect mold in your home?
Well, first and foremost, I will say, at least in the state of Oklahoma, it is illegal for a company to both be an inspector and remediator. So if you ever have anyone saying, I can inspect it and fix it, that is not your person. So yes, you were wise to kind of go that route. I mean, truly, we've got a mold dog in Oklahoma, out of Oklahoma City. That's who I refer. That is a great starting place, because they will tag all the places in your house. The dog does, and then the woman who runs the business, and it's her dog, she then goes back behind the dog and says, okay, this is what we're looking at. She'll get up in your crawl space. In your attic, and go down in your crawl space. Really tell you what you're looking at, and then makes recommendations on like, hey, from what I'm seeing visually, we don't even need to test. Like you can pay me to test it, but she's just really honest and she wants to help families. She has a similar story. So you'll find that a lot in this industry, that a lot of those of us that have walked this, are like, there's such a need. I need to go help others, So that's always my recommendation, is find a mold dog in your state that has good reviews. Go on to some of those Facebook groups and do a search on there. A lot of people are using the dogs. And then kind of go from there. Mold is tricky. It is a can of worms. So what I also would say is, like I said in my story, I wasn't quite ready to deal with the depths of what that meant. And I could look at that through shame lenses and say, I kept my child sicker longer. That's true. And then I can take those glasses off and put on grace glasses and say, I was doing the best I could with what I had.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just really want to say, take it one step at a time, do the next right thing. You have to put your oxygen mask on first as a parent. You have to. So do what you need to do to settle yourself and then just move forward with the next right thing. It will unfold as it's supposed to.
Well, thank you. Wise words, Laura. And We will put some of the resources that you have found in our additional resources for the episode, and we look forward to talking to you again.
Great. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Subscribe and review Conversation Balloons on your favorite podcast platform. Find me at leahfarish.com and on Instagram at LEAHFARISH. This episode is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Herzog Foundation.